The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Dorothy Mitchell pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway of Blackstone Financial Tower. Her weathered hands gripped the handle tightly, knuckles white from years of hard labor. At 52, she moved with a slight limp that most people never bothered to notice. After all, who really looks at the janitor? I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. "Dorothy, get over here and clean up this mess," barked Harrison Webb, the vice president of operations, pointing at coffee stains on the pristine conference room table. "And next time, try to be invisible when the clients arrive. Your presence is distracting." Dorothy nodded silently, her steel-gray eyes revealing nothing as she began wiping down the mahogany surface. If only Harrison knew that these same hands had once defused bombs in the mountains of Afghanistan. If only he knew about the Purple Heart hidden in her studio apartment, wrapped carefully in an old American flag. But Dorothy Mitchell had learned to keep her secrets buried deep. Some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud. Dorothy arrived at Blackstone Financial every morning at 5:30 a.m. sharp, 2 hours before the first executive would stumble through the glass doors clutching their overpriced coffee. The building stood like a monument to corporate power in downtown Chicago, its 43 floors housing some of the most influential financial minds in the country. Dorothy knew every inch of those floors, every hidden corner where important conversations took place, every executive who treated her like furniture. She'd been working as head custodian for 3 years now, ever since moving to Chicago from her small hometown of Cedar Falls, Iowa. The transition hadn't been easy. Going from Sergeant Dorothy Mitchell, decorated combat engineer, to Dorothy the Invisible Janitor had required a complete reconstruction of her identity. Some days, she barely recognized herself in the reflection of the polished windows she cleaned. The early morning hours were her favorite. In the silence before the corporate machine roared to life, Dorothy could work in peace, methodically moving through each floor with military precision. Her routine never varied. Start on the top floor with Harrison Webb's executive suite, work her way down through senior management, then tackle the middle floors where the analysts and junior staff worked. The basement parking garage and lobby came last. This particular Tuesday morning felt different, though Dorothy couldn't quite place why. As she entered Harrison's corner office, she noticed new photographs on his desk, family vacation shots from what looked like Martha's Vineyard. Harrison's wife and 2 teenage children smiled from behind expensive sunglasses, their perfectly white teeth gleaming against tanned faces. Dorothy paused for just a moment, remembering her own family photos that she kept locked away in a box under her bed. Different wars, different losses, different kinds of pain. "You're early today," came a voice from behind her. Dorothy turned to see Marcus Chen, one of the few people in the building who bothered to learn her name. Marcus worked in IT and often stayed late or arrived early, troubleshooting the complex computer systems that kept Blackstone running. He was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Same time as always," Dorothy replied, continuing to dust Harrison's bookshelf. "You're the one who's early." Marcus smiled sheepishly. Server update. Had to come in before everyone else logs on. He paused, watching her work. "You know, I've always wondered, how did you end up here? You seem like someone who's done more than just this." It was a question Dorothy had learned to deflect with practiced ease. "Life takes you where it takes you," she said simply. "Not everyone gets to choose their path." But Marcus wasn't satisfied with the generic response. "Come on, Dorothy, I've worked here for 5 years, and I've never met anyone who organizes cleaning supplies with the precision of a military operation. Your supply closet looks like something out of a logistics manual." Dorothy's hands stilled on the bookshelf. She'd been careless, letting her training show through. In the Army, organization wasn't just helpful, it was survival. When you're dealing with explosives and complex engineering equipment in hostile territory, one misplaced tool could mean the difference between life and death. Old habits die hard. "Just like things neat," she said, moving toward the door. "Should probably let you get to your work." "Dorothy, wait." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. Look, I don't know what your story is, but I want you to know that not everyone here thinks of you as just the cleaning lady. Some of us see you. The words hit deeper than Dorothy expected. She nodded curtly and pushed her cart into the hallway, leaving Marcus alone with his computers and his questions. The rest of the morning passed in its usual rhythm. Dorothy moved through the floors like a ghost, emptying trash bins, vacuuming carpets, and polishing surfaces, while the building gradually filled with life. By 8 a.m., the elevators were humming with activity as employees arrived for another day of high-stakes financial maneuvering. That's when Dorothy usually encountered the worst of it. Jesus, Dorothy, watch where you're going, snapped Jennifer Walsh, a senior analyst who always wore her blonde hair in a tight bun that matched her tight smile. Dorothy had accidentally backed her cleaning cart into Jennifer's path while exiting an office. Some of us have important work to do. Sorry, Miss Walsh, Dorothy murmured, quickly moving the cart aside. And while we're at it, could you please use some better air freshener in the bathrooms? The cheap stuff you're using smells like a gas station. Jennifer adjusted her designer handbag and strode away, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. Dorothy stood frozen for a moment, memories threatening to surface. The smell of diesel fuel and burning rubber, the sound of her team's boots against concrete as they moved through the compound, the weight of her gear, and the responsibility of keeping her soldiers alive. She pushed the memories down, the way she learned to do, and continued with her work. Around noon, Dorothy was cleaning the conference room on the 28th floor when she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. Through the partially open door, she could hear Harrison Webb talking with several other executives about the upcoming company retreat. "I'm telling you, we need to cut costs somewhere," Harrison was saying. "The quarterly numbers are down, and the board is breathing down my neck. Maybe it's time to outsource some of the maintenance work." "What about Dorothy?" asked James Morrison, the CFO. "She's been reliable." Harrison laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Dorothy's just a janitor, Jem. They're a dime a dozen. We could hire a cleaning service for half what we're paying her, and they'd probably do a better job. Have you seen how slow she moves? That limp of hers isn't getting any better." "She does seem to have some kind of injury," Jennifer Walsh chimed in. Dorothy recognized her voice immediately. "Probably a workers' comp claim waiting to happen. Better to cut ties before she becomes a liability." Dorothy's hands trembled as she gripped her cleaning supplies. The purple scar on her left leg, hidden beneath her uniform pants, seemed to throb with phantom pain. She'd earned that scar, and the limp that came with it, when an IED exploded 50 feet from her position in Kandahar province. The shrapnel had torn through her leg, but she'd still managed to crawl 200 meters through enemy fire to reach her wounded teammate. "Plus, she gives me the creeps," Jennifer continued. "There's something about her eyes, like she's seen things. It's unsettling." If only they knew what those eyes had really seen. Dorothy had watched friends die in her arms. She'd defused bombs that could have killed dozens of innocent civilians. She'd led rescue missions through hostile territory and received commendations for her courage under fire. But here, in this gleaming tower of corporate ambition, she was just an aging janitor with a limp and unsettling eyes. "Well, whatever we decide, it needs to happen soon," Harrison concluded. "The retreat is next month, and I want a clean slate going into the new quarter. We'll discuss it more at the board meeting." Dorothy finished cleaning the conference room in mechanical silence, her mind racing. She'd survived 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan, but the thought of losing this job terrified her in ways that combat never had. This wasn't about pride or career advancement. It was about survival. At 52, with no college degree and a military background that seemed to intimidate more employers than it impressed, finding another job wouldn't be easy. As she worked her way through the afternoon, Dorothy found herself studying the faces of her colleagues with new eyes. How many of them saw her as Harrison did, a replaceable cog in the corporate machine? How many had never bothered to wonder about the person behind the uniform? The irony wasn't lost on her. In the Army, rank and respect were earned through skill, courage, and dedication to your fellow soldiers. Your background didn't matter. What mattered was whether you could be trusted when lives were on the line. But in the corporate world, it seemed like respect was tied to titles, salaries, and educational pedigrees. By 6 p.m., most of the building had emptied out, leaving only the dedicated workaholics and the cleaning crew. Dorothy was finishing up the executive floor when she heard familiar footsteps approaching. She looked up to see Marcus Chen walking toward her, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the fancy machine in the break room. "Thought you might need this," he said. "It's been a long day." Dorothy accepted the coffee gratefully, surprised by the gesture. "Thank you. You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Marcus interrupted, "and I wanted to apologize for pressing you earlier about your background. It's none of my business." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their coffee and looking out at the Chicago skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched endlessly in all directions, millions of lights twinkling like earthbound stars. "Marcus," Dorothy said finally, "what do you see when I look at me?"
A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The question seemed to surprise him. He studied her face carefully, as if really seeing her for the first time. "I see someone who's carrying a lot more weight than just a cleaning cart," he said quietly. "I see someone who knows how to handle responsibility, who takes pride in doing things right, even when no one's watching. And I see someone who's been through something that changed them." Dorothy felt a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. When was the last time anyone had really looked at her, really seen her, as more than just another piece of the building's infrastructure? "Why do you stay here?" Marcus asked. "At Blackstone, I mean. Someone with your attention to detail, your work ethic, you could probably find something better." Dorothy considered the question seriously. Why did she stay? The pay was decent, but not exceptional. The benefits were adequate. The work itself was honest, but hardly fulfilling. Maybe it was because invisibility had become a comfortable shield. Maybe it was because she'd grown tired of explaining herself, tired of seeing the doubt in people's eyes when they learned about her military service. "Sometimes it's easier to be underestimated," she said finally. "People leave you alone when they think they know exactly who you are." Marcus nodded as if he understood. But what happens when being underestimated starts to hurt more than being seen? It was a question Dorothy couldn't answer, at least not yet. But as she finished her coffee and returned to her work, she found herself thinking about the Purple Heart hidden in her apartment, wrapped in an American flag that had once draped the coffin of her best friend and fellow soldier, Sarah Rodriguez. Sarah had died in Dorothy's arms after that IED explosion, whispering Dorothy's name with her final breath. Dorothy had carried Sarah's flag home from Afghanistan, along with her own Purple Heart and the weight of survivor's guilt that no military psychologist had been able to lift from her shoulders. Some nights, she would unwrap the medal and remember what it felt like to be valued for her courage, her skill, her willingness to put others before herself. But tomorrow morning, she would put on her janitor's uniform again and become invisible, because sometimes invisibility was the only armor left. The emergency alarm pierced through the morning silence of Blackstone Financial Tower like a knife. Dorothy was on the 15th floor, restocking bathroom supplies, when the building's fire safety system suddenly erupted in a cacophony of warning sounds and flashing red lights. "Attention all personnel," came the automated voice over the intercom. "This is not a drill. Please evacuate the building immediately using the nearest stairwell. Do not use elevators." Dorothy's military training kicked in instantly. While other employees began to panic, stumbling out of offices with confused expressions and coffee still in hand, Dorothy was already moving with calculated precision. She abandoned her supply cart and headed straight for the emergency coordinator station on each floor, something most people didn't even know existed. The coordinator for the 15th floor was Patricia Gonzalez, a nervous junior accountant who looked absolutely terrified as people began streaming toward the exits. Patricia was fumbling with a clipboard, trying to remember her emergency training while chaos erupted around her.
Patricia, Dorothy said calmly, approaching the panicked woman. What's your count? My count? I don't. There are so many people, and they're all talking at once, and I can't. Deep breaths, Dorothy instructed, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd commanded troops under fire. How many people are assigned to this floor? 37, Patricia stammered, looking at her clipboard with shaking hands. Good. Now count them as they pass. I'll handle the north stairwell, you take the south. Make sure everyone's moving in an orderly fashion. No running, no pushing. Dorothy didn't wait for permission. She moved to the north stairwell entrance, where a bottleneck was already forming as people tried to cram through the doorway all at once. A few employees were arguing about whether they should go back for their laptops and personal belongings. Single file, Dorothy commanded, her voice cutting through the confusion. Leave everything behind. Move quickly, but don't run. Keep your hands on the railings. Something in her tone made people listen. The arguing stopped, the pushing subsided, and the evacuation began to flow more smoothly. Dorothy positioned herself at the stairwell entrance, mentally counting each person who passed while keeping an eye on the overall situation. "Ma'am," called out David Kim, a young analyst Dorothy recognized from the trading floor. "My laptop has all my client files on it. I really need to—" "Leave it," Dorothy said firmly. "Whatever's on that laptop isn't worth your life." "But you don't understand. This is my career we're talking about. I can't just—" Dorothy grabbed David's arm, not roughly, but with enough authority to get his attention. "Son, I need you to listen to me very carefully. In an emergency, you have one job: get yourself to safety. Everything else can be replaced. You cannot." David looked into Dorothy's eyes and saw something there that made him nod and join the evacuation line without another word of protest. As the floor cleared, Dorothy did a quick sweep of the offices to make sure no one was hiding under desks or stuck in bathrooms. She'd seen enough combat situations to know that people didn't always think clearly under stress. In the far corner office, she found Rebecca Martinez, a graphic designer, crouched under her desk and hyperventilating. "Rebecca," Dorothy said gently, kneeling down to meet the woman's terrified gaze, "I need you to breathe with me, okay? In through your nose, hold for 3, out through your mouth." I can't breathe. My chest is so tight." "Yes, you can," Dorothy said, her voice steady and reassuring. "You're having a panic attack, but you're going to be fine. Focus on my voice and breathe with me." Dorothy guided Rebecca through several breathing exercises, techniques she'd learned during her own therapy sessions after returning from Afghanistan. Within 2 minutes, Rebecca's breathing had stabilized enough for her to stand. "Can you walk?" Dorothy asked. Rebecca nodded, still shaky, but functional. "Good. Stay right behind me. We're going to take this slow and steady." Dorothy escorted Rebecca to the stairwell, making sure the woman stayed calm during the descent. They were among the last people to reach the ground floor, where employees were gathering in the designated assembly area across the street from the building. Fire trucks were already on scene, their sirens wailing as firefighters prepared to enter the building. Dorothy could see smoke coming from one of the upper floors, the 35th if she had to guess based on the wind patterns and the color of the smoke. "Mitchell!" Harrison Webb's voice cut through the crowd. "Where the hell have you been? I've been looking everywhere for you." Dorothy turned to face her boss, who was standing with a group of other executives near the incident command post that the fire department had set up. Harrison looked agitated, his usually perfect hair disheveled and his expensive suit wrinkled. "I was helping with the evacuation on 15, Dorothy replied simply. "That's not your job," Harrison snapped. "Your job is to clean the building, not play emergency coordinator. Patricia Gonzalez was supposed to handle that floor." "Patricia needed assistance," Dorothy said, keeping her voice level despite the anger building in her chest. "That's not the point. You don't have the training or authority to—" Actually, she does. The voice belonged to Captain Maria Santos of the Chicago Fire Department, who had approached during Harrison's tirade. Captain Santos was a compact woman in her 40s with the kind of bearing that suggested she didn't tolerate nonsense from anyone. "Excuse me?" Harrison turned to face the fire captain, clearly irritated by the interruption.
I said she has the training, Captain Santos repeated, looking directly at Dorothy. I've been watching the security footage from inside the building. Your janitor here organized one of the most efficient floor evacuations I've seen in 15 years with this department. She knew exactly what to do and how to do it. Dorothy felt a flush of recognition as Captain Santos studied her face more closely. Have we met before? The fire captain asked. I don't think so, Dorothy replied, though something about the woman did seem familiar. Captain Santos was about to respond when one of her lieutenants approached with an urgent report. Captain, we need you inside. The fire started in the electrical room on 35, but it's spreading faster than we anticipated. Looks like there might be some structural damage to the support beams. Copy that, Captain Santos said, then turned back to Dorothy. I'd like to talk with you later, if that's possible. I have a feeling we have more in common than you might think. As the fire captain headed into the building with her team, Harrison grabbed Dorothy by the arm and pulled her aside. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, he hissed, but I want it to stop. You're a janitor, Dorothy, a janitor. Don't get any ideas above your station just because some fire captain paid you a compliment. Dorothy looked down at Harrison's hand on her arm, then back up at his face. For just a moment, she allowed some of the steel from her military days to show in her expression. Remove your hand, she said quietly. Something in her tone made Harrison release his grip immediately. He took a step back, suddenly looking uncertain. I was helping people, Dorothy continued, her voice still calm but carrying an edge that Harrison had never heard before. If you have a problem with that, perhaps you should examine your own priorities. Before Harrison could respond, Dorothy walked away to rejoin the other employees in the assembly area. She found Marcus Chen standing with a group of IT staff, all of them looking up at the smoking building with concern. Dorothy, Marcus called out when he saw her. Thank God you're okay. Someone said you were still inside helping people get out. Just doing what needed to be done, Dorothy replied. That's not what Patricia Gonzalez said, interrupted Jennifer Walsh, who had apparently been eavesdropping. She told everyone how you basically took over the whole evacuation, said you acted like you were in charge or something. Several other employees had gathered around, curious about the conversation. Dorothy could feel their eyes on her, some admiring, others suspicious. I simply helped when help was needed, Dorothy said. But where did you learn to do all that? Asked David Kim, the young analyst she'd convinced to leave his laptop behind. I mean, you knew exactly what to do. It was like you'd done it before. Come off it, said Tom Bradley, a portfolio manager who rarely acknowledged Dorothy's existence. That wasn't common sense. That was training. Military training, if I had to guess. The group fell silent, everyone staring at Dorothy with new interest. She could see the wheels turning in their minds, trying to reconcile the quiet janitor they thought they knew with the competent emergency coordinator they just witnessed. Were you in the military? Rebecca Martinez asked softly. She was the woman Dorothy had helped through her panic attack, and her voice carried genuine gratitude rather than mere curiosity. Dorothy looked around at the circle of faces, all waiting for her answer. For 3 years, she'd successfully maintained her invisibility, keeping her past locked away where it couldn't complicate her present. But standing there, in the shadow of the burning building, surrounded by people whose lives she might have helped save, the weight of her secrets felt heavier than ever. A long time ago, she said finally. Different life. What branch? Tom pressed, his investment banker instincts driving him to extract more information. Army, Dorothy replied, then immediately regretted giving even that much detail. How long did you serve? Tom, Marcus interrupted, sensing Dorothy's discomfort. Maybe we should give Dorothy some space. It's been a stressful morning for everyone. But Tom wasn't ready to let it go. I'm just curious. I mean, we've all been working together for years, and none of us knew. Don't you think that's interesting? What I think, said a new voice, is that Dorothy's military service explains why she handled today so professionally. Everyone turned to see Captain Santos approaching the group. The fire captain had removed her helmet, revealing graying hair and intelligent dark eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Captain, Dorothy said, automatically straightening her posture in the presence of a fellow service member, even from a different branch. At ease, soldier, Captain Santos said with a slight smile.
I wanted to thank you for your assistance today. Your actions probably prevented several injuries, maybe worse. I was just. You were just being a leader, Captain Santos interrupted, which is exactly what I'd expect from someone with your background. The circle of Blackstone employees exchanged glances, clearly sensing that there was more to this conversation than they understood. Captain, Dorothy said carefully, I should get back to. Actually, I was hoping you might be able to help us with something, Captain Santos continued. We're having trouble accessing the building's emergency systems from the outside. The fire damaged some of the control panels, and we need someone who knows the building layout to guide us to the backup systems. Dorothy hesitated. Getting involved would mean revealing more about her capabilities, more about who she really was beneath the janitor's uniform. But people's lives might be at stake. The backup control room is in the sub-basement, she said, level B3 northeast corner. But the access requires 2 key cards, one from maintenance and one from security. Do you have access to those key cards? I have maintenance clearance. Security would have to be arranged through Mr. Webb. All eyes turned to Harrison, who had been standing at the edge of the group, listening to the exchange with a deepening frown. Absolutely not, Harrison said flatly. Dorothy doesn't have the authority or the training to. With respect, sir, Captain Santos interrupted, her voice taking on a harder edge. This is now a fire department operation, and I'm requesting Dorothy's assistance based on her demonstrated competence and knowledge of the building. She's a janitor, Harrison repeated, his voice rising with frustration. You can't just. She's a veteran who just proved she knows how to handle an emergency, Captain Santos shot back. And right now, that's exactly what we need. The tension between the fire captain and the corporate executive was palpable. Dorothy found herself caught in the middle, acutely aware that whatever happened next would change everything about her carefully constructed invisible life at Blackstone Financial. Around them, smoke continued to pour from the upper floors of the building, and somewhere in the distance, more sirens wailed as additional emergency responders raced toward the scene. Dorothy looked up at the building where she'd spent the last 3 years of her life mopping floors and emptying trash cans, and realized that by tomorrow morning, nothing would ever be the same. The sub-basement of Blackstone Financial felt like a different world. Down here, 3 levels below street level, the polished marble and gleaming chrome gave way to concrete walls and exposed pipes. Dorothy led Captain Santos and 2 firefighters through the maze of mechanical rooms, her keycard granting them access to areas most employees didn't even know existed. How do you know this place so well? Asked Lieutenant Rodriguez, one of the firefighters following behind them. The beam of his flashlight danced across Dorothy's back. Part of the job, Dorothy replied, though the truth was more complicated. During her first week at Blackstone, she'd spent an entire night mapping out the building's infrastructure. You never knew when you'd need an alternate route or a secure location. They reached the backup control room, a small chamber filled with monitors and control panels that managed the building's emergency systems. Dorothy used her keycard to unlock the door, then stepped aside to let the firefighters work. Jesus, muttered Captain Santos, looking at the complex array of switches and displays. This is more sophisticated than I expected. Can you make sense of any of this? Dorothy stepped closer to the main control panel, her eyes scanning the various indicators and warning lights. The system was more advanced than anything she'd worked with in Afghanistan, but the basic principles were the same. You had to understand how power flows through a building's infrastructure. The fire suppression system for floors 30 through 40 is offline, she said, pointing to a series of red lights on the left side of the panel. Looks like the electrical damage cut power to the water pumps on those levels. Can you get them back online? Dorothy studied the panel more carefully, tracing the circuit paths with her finger. Maybe. The backup generators are still functional, but the automatic switching system failed. I could try to reroute power manually, but what? It would mean overriding several safety protocols. If I make a mistake, I could cause more damage than the fire itself. Captain Santos looked at Dorothy with new respect. How much do you really know about building systems? Before Dorothy could answer, her radio crackled to life.
It was one of the firefighters still outside. "Captain Santos, we've got a problem. The structural engineer just arrived, and he's saying the fire damage on 35 might have compromised the support beams for the floors above. If those supports fail—" "How many floors are we talking about?" Captain Santos asked into her radio. 36 through 40. Maybe 500 people work up there on a normal day." Dorsey felt her blood run cold. She knew those floors well. She cleaned them every day. The marketing department, human resources, upper-level management. If the building collapsed— "Captain," Dorothy said quietly, "I can get those suppression systems back online, but someone needs to make a decision fast." Captain Santos looked at her for a long moment, weighing the risks. "What's your confidence level?" It was a question Dorothy hadn't heard since her Army days, but she understood exactly what the captain was asking. In combat engineering, confidence levels weren't about ego, they were about life and death calculations. 80%, Dorothy replied without hesitation. "Maybe 85. "That's good enough for me. Do it." Dorothy moved to the control panel, her hand steady despite the pressure. She began flipping switches and adjusting settings, her movements precise and deliberate. Years of disarming improvised explosive devices had taught her to work methodically under extreme stress. "There," she said after several tense minutes. "Power's rerouted to the upper-level pumps. You should have full suppression capability on 35 through 40. Captain Santos spoke into her radio, confirming that the water pressure had been restored to the upper floors. Within minutes, they received word that the fire was finally under control. "Outstanding work," Captain Santos said, then paused. "You know, I've been trying to place you since we met upstairs. Dorothy Mitchell, were you ever stationed at Bagram Air Base?" Dorothy's hands stilled on the control panel. Bagram? She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. "You were there too?" Dorothy asked quietly. 3 tours. I was Air Force then, working base security and emergency response. I remember Dorothy Mitchell, who helped design the new bomb disposal protocols after that incident in 2018. The incident. Dorothy closed her eyes briefly, remembering. A complex IED hidden in a supply truck that had made it past 3 security checkpoints. She'd been the one to identify the device and develop a new inspection protocol that had saved countless lives. "That was a different person," Dorothy said finally. "Different life." "Was it?" Captain Santos asked. "Because the woman I just watched reroute a building's electrical system under pressure looks an awful lot like the combat engineer who saved half our base from getting blown up." Before Dorothy could respond, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Harrison Webb appeared in the doorway, flanked by 2 security guards and looking absolutely furious. "What the hell is going on down here?" he demanded. "Dorothy, you were supposed to wait outside with the other employees. You have no business being in restricted areas." "She's here at my request," Captain Santos said firmly. "And thanks to her expertise, we just prevented this fire from becoming a major catastrophe." "Her expertise?" Harrison laughed bitterly. "Captain, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but Dorothy is a janitor. She cleans toilets and empties trash cans. Whatever she did down here was probably just luck." Dorothy felt something snap inside her chest. 3 years of biting her tongue, 3 years of accepting Harrison's dismissive attitude, 3 years of pretending to be less than she was. She turned to face her boss, and for the first time since coming to work at Blackstone, she let him see exactly who she really was. "Sergeant Dorothy Mitchell, United States Army Corps of Engineers. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Purple Heart. I've disarmed more explosive devices than you've probably seen in movies, Mr. Webb. So when I tell you that I just prevented your building from burning down, you might want to show a little gratitude instead of running your mouth." The security guards took an involuntary step back. Harrison's face went pale, then red, then pale again. Captain Santos was smiling openly now, clearly enjoying the show. He sputtered, "You never said. Your employment records don't mention." "My employment records mention exactly what they need to mention. My military service has nothing to do with my ability to clean floors and empty trash cans, which is all you've ever cared about." "But why?" Harrison asked, some of his bluster deflating.
Why would someone with your background take a job as a janitor? It was a fair question, and one Dorothy had asked herself many times over the past 3 years. Why had she chosen invisibility over recognition? Why had she buried her accomplishments under a uniform that made her anonymous? Because sometimes, she said quietly, it's easier to start over as nobody than to try to be somebody again. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that Dorothy wasn't ready to explore. Captain Santos seemed to understand, though. She'd probably seen other veterans struggling with the transition from military service to civilian life. Well, Captain Santos said, breaking the silence, for what it's worth, you're somebody to me, and to everyone in this building who's going home safe tonight because of what you did. Harrison opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, another voice echoed down the corridor. Mr. Webb? Sir, are you down there? It was Marcus Chen, calling from the stairwell entrance. He appeared a moment later, slightly out of breath from the descent.
Marcus, Harrison said, grateful for the interruption. What are you doing down here? The FBI is here, Marcus replied, his expression grim. They want to speak with you about the fire. Apparently it wasn't an accident. The words hit the group like a physical blow. Dorothy felt her military instincts kicking in again, her mind immediately shifting to threat assessment mode. What do you mean, not an accident? Captain Santos demanded. The investigators found evidence of an accelerant in the electrical room where the fire started, Marcus explained. They think someone deliberately set it. They're calling it arson, possibly terrorism. Dorothy's blood ran cold. If this was intentional, if someone had targeted Blackstone Financial specifically, then the evacuation might not be over. Whoever had set the fire might have planned for multiple phases of attack. We need to get everyone away from the building, Dorothy said urgently. If this was planned, there could be secondary devices. Secondary devices? Harrison asked, clearly out of his depth. It's a common terrorist tactic, Dorothy explained, her training taking over. Set a fire or small explosion to draw people to a specific location, then detonate a larger device to maximize casualties. We did bomb threat assessments in Afghanistan. This fits the pattern. Captain Santos was already reaching for her radio. All units, this is Santos. I need the evacuation perimeter expanded immediately. Treat this as a potential secondary device situation. But even as she spoke, Dorothy was thinking about something else. The timing of the fire, the specific location where it had started, the way the electrical systems had failed. If this was sabotage, it had been carried out by someone with detailed knowledge of the building's infrastructure. Someone with access. Someone like her. The realization hit her like a punch to the stomach. She was probably going to be a suspect. A former combat engineer with detailed knowledge of explosives and building systems, working as a janitor with access to every floor of the building. To an FBI investigator, she would look like the perfect inside threat. Dorothy, Captain Santos said, noticing her expression. What's wrong? Nothing, Dorothy replied, but her mind was racing. How much did the FBI know about her background? How long before they connected the dots between the fire and the former Army engineer who happened to work in the building? She looked around at the faces surrounding her. Harrison with his mixture of confusion and suspicion, Captain Santos with her growing respect and concern, Marcus with his genuine worry. How many of them would still look at her the same once the investigation began? We should go back up, Dorothy said quietly. The FBI will want to interview everyone who was in the building today. As they made their way back through the maze of corridors toward the stairwell, Dorothy couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking toward something that would change her life forever. The invisible janitor was about to become very visible indeed, and she wasn't sure she was ready for the scrutiny that was coming. Behind them, the backup control room hummed quietly, its restored systems keeping the building's upper floor safe from fire. But Dorothy knew that some fires couldn't be contained by water and emergency protocols. Some fires burned through carefully constructed facades and forced you to confront truths you'd spent years trying to bury. And this fire was just getting started. The FBI had commandeered the entire 20th floor of the Marriott Hotel across the street from Blackstone Financial. Dorothy sat in an uncomfortable metal chair in Conference Room B, staring at her reflection in the one-way mirror while waiting for the federal agents to return. She'd been here for 3 hours now, answering the same questions over and over again. Special Agent Rebecca Torres entered the room carrying a thick manila folder and a fresh cup of coffee. She was younger than Dorothy had expected, probably mid-30s, with sharp eyes and an all-business demeanor that reminded Dorothy of the military intelligence officer she'd worked with overseas. "Sorry for the wait, Miss Mitchell," Agent Torres said, settling into the chair across from Dorothy. "I've been reviewing your file, and I have to say, it makes for interesting reading." Dorothy remained silent, her hands folded calmly in her lap. Years of military discipline had taught her when to speak and when to listen. "Sergeant Dorothy Mitchell," Agent Torres continued, opening the file. 3 tours in Afghanistan, specializing in explosive ordnance disposal and combat engineering. Honorably discharged in 2019 after sustaining injuries from an IED explosion. Purple Heart recipient, 2 Bronze Stars, and, according to your commanding officer, one of the most skilled bomb technicians he'd ever worked with. Agent Torres looked up from the file. "That's quite a resume for someone who's been working as a janitor for the past 3 years." "People have their reasons for changing careers," Dorothy replied evenly. "True, but people with your particular skill set don't usually go unnoticed by law enforcement, especially when they happen to be working in a building that gets targeted by what appears to be a sophisticated arson attack." Dorothy felt the familiar tightness in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. "Are you suggesting I had something to do with the fire?" "I'm not suggesting anything yet," Agent Torres said. "I'm just trying to understand how someone with extensive knowledge of explosives and building systems ended up mopping floors at Blackstone Financial. Help me connect those dots." For a moment, Dorothy considered telling Agent Torres everything about the nightmares that still woke her up at 3 a.m., about Sarah Rodriguez bleeding out in her arms while insurgents fired at them from the surrounding hills, about the therapy sessions that hadn't helped, and the job interviews where potential employers saw her military record as a liability rather than an asset. Instead, she said, "Sometimes life doesn't go according to plan." Agent Torres made a note in her file. "Fair enough. Let's talk about today. You were one of the last people to leave the building during the evacuation. Why?" "I was helping other employees get out safely." "That's what several witnesses have told us. Patricia Gonzalez, the emergency coordinator for the 15th floor, said you essentially took over the evacuation process. She used the word commanding." Dorothy didn't respond. "Then," Agent Torres continued, "Captain Santos of the Chicago Fire Department specifically requested your assistance in accessing the building's emergency systems. According to her report, you demonstrated extensive knowledge of the building's infrastructure and successfully restored power to the fire suppression systems." "I was helping in an emergency situation." "Yes, you were, and you did an excellent job." Agent Torres leaned forward. "But here's what's puzzling me. The arsonist who set this fire knew exactly where to target the building's electrical systems for maximum damage. They understood the infrastructure well enough to disable the automatic fire suppression on multiple floors. That takes specialized knowledge." Dorothy met the agent's gaze steadily. "What are you asking me?"
I'm asking how a janitor knows more about building systems than some of our technical experts. I'm asking why someone with your background chose to work in a building that handles sensitive financial information for several government agencies. And I'm asking whether you've noticed anything unusual in your 3 years at Blackstone that might help us understand who did this. The last question caught Dorothy off guard. In all her worry about becoming a suspect, she hadn't considered that her unique position in the building might make her a valuable witness rather than just a person of interest. "Unusual how?" Dorothy asked. "People who don't belong, conversations that seemed out of place, anyone asking questions about the building's systems or security protocols." Dorothy thought carefully. 3 years of invisibility had given her access to countless conversations that people assumed she couldn't hear or wouldn't understand. Board meetings held in conference rooms while she cleaned. Late-night phone calls from executives who treated her like furniture. private discussions between employees who forgot she was there. There was something, she said slowly. About 6 months ago, I was cleaning the 36th floor after hours, and I overheard a conversation between two men I didn't recognize. They weren't Blackstone employees. Wrong clothing, wrong manner of speaking, but they had security badges. Agent Torres looked up from her notes. What were they discussing? Building access points. Fire exists. They mentioned something about contingency plans and insurance policies. At the time, I assumed they were talking about actual insurance, but now you're thinking they meant something else? Dorothy nodded. One of them mentioned the electrical room on 35 specifically, said it was a critical vulnerability that needed to be addressed. Agent Torres was writing furiously now. Can you describe these men? One was tall, maybe 6'2", dark hair, expensive suit, but wrong shoes, tactical boots instead of dress shoes. The other was shorter, stockier, and had a scar across his left eyebrow. Both of them moved like the military or law enforcement. Would you be able to identify them from photographs? Possibly. Agent Torres made another note, then looked up at Dorothy with new interest. Ms. Mitchell, I'm beginning to think we may have approached this investigation from the wrong angle. Instead of looking at you as a potential suspect, maybe we should be looking at you as our best witness. Before Dorothy could respond, there was a knock on the conference room door. Another agent entered, older, with gray hair and the bearing of someone in charge. Agent Torres, he said, we need to talk. The building management just provided us with the security footage from the past month, and we found something you need to see. Agent Torres excused herself and followed the senior agent out of the room, leaving Dorothy alone with her thoughts. Through the window, she could see Blackstone Financial Tower in the distance, parts of it still blackened from the fire. Somewhere in that building was her cleaning cart, probably right where she'd left it when the alarm went off. Her simple, invisible life interrupted by forces she was only beginning to understand. 20 minutes later, Agent Torres returned with a laptop computer and a grim expression. Ms. Mitchell, she said, setting up the laptop on the conference table, I need you to look at something. The screen showed security footage from inside Blackstone Financial, date-stamped 3 weeks earlier. Dorothy recognized the 35th floor corridor immediately. She'd walked down that hallway thousands of times over the past 3 years. On the screen, a figure in a maintenance uniform was entering the electrical room. The person moved with purpose, clearly familiar with the building's layout. They spent approximately 15 minutes inside the room, then emerged and walked calmly toward the stairwell. Do you recognize this person? Agent Torres asked. Dorothy studied the footage carefully. The figure was wearing a baseball cap and kept their head down, making identification difficult. But there was something familiar about their build, their gait. I can't see their faces clearly, Dorothy said. Neither can we. But here's what's interesting. Agent Torres clicked to another section of footage. This is from the lobby security camera on the same day. The new footage showed the same person leaving the building through the main entrance. For just a moment, they looked up at the camera, and Dorothy's blood ran cold. It was Tyler Walsh, Jennifer Walsh's younger brother. Dorothy had met him exactly once, about a year ago, when Jennifer had brought him to the office during a family emergency. He'd been wearing civilian clothes then, but Dorothy remembered his build, his nervous energy, and the way he'd kept asking questions about the building's layout. You know him, Agent Torres said, reading Dorothy's expression. Tyler Walsh, Dorothy replied. He's the brother of one of the senior analysts here, Jennifer Walsh. Agent Torres was already reaching for her phone. What can you tell me about him? Not much. I only met him once, but Jennifer mentioned that he'd had some trouble finding steady work since getting out of the military, said he'd been struggling with the transition to civilian life. What branch? I think she said Army. Special Forces, maybe? Jennifer always spoke about him like he was some kind of war hero, but also like she was worried about him. Agent Torres finished her phone call and turned back to Dorothy. We're bringing in Jennifer Walsh for questioning.
In the meantime, I need you to think carefully about any interactions you've had with Tyler Walsh or any conversations you might have overheard about him. Dorothy closed her eyes, searching her memory. There had been something, months ago, a phone conversation she'd overheard while cleaning Jennifer's office late one evening. Jennifer was on the phone with someone a few months back, Dorothy said slowly. She was upset, crying. I heard her say something about Tyler needing money, about him being involved with people she didn't trust. She mentioned something about him feeling like the military had betrayed him, like the country hadn't kept its promises to veterans. Anything else? She said he'd been talking about making them pay for how veterans were treated. At the time, I thought she meant filing a lawsuit or something, but now… Agent Torres nodded grimly. Now, it sounds like he might have had other ideas about evening the score. Dorothy felt a chill run down her spine. If Tyler Walsh had targeted Blackstone Financial as some kind of statement about corporate America's treatment of veterans, then she understood his anger, even if she couldn't condone his methods. How many veterans like herself had struggled to find their place in civilian society? How many had felt discarded by the very system they'd sworn to protect? Miss Mitchell, Agent Torres said, interrupting her thoughts, I'm going to need you to stay available for the next few days. We may have more questions as this investigation develops.
Am I still a suspect? Agent Torres considered the question carefully. Let's just say you've moved from the suspect column to the witness column. Your knowledge of building systems and your military background make you valuable to this investigation, not a threat to it. As Dorothy prepared to leave the hotel, Agent Torres stopped her at the door. One more thing, the FBI agent said. Captain Santos asked me to give you this. She handed Dorothy a business card with Captain Santos's contact information written on the back. She said to tell you that the Chicago Fire Department is always looking for experienced people who know how to handle emergencies. Apparently, they have an opening for a training coordinator position that might be a better fit for someone with your skills. Dorothy looked at the card, then back at Agent Torres. Why are you telling me this? Because maybe it's time you stopped hiding who you really are, Agent Torres replied. The world needs people like you, Miss Mitchell, people who run toward danger instead of away from it, people who use their skills to protect others instead of harm them. As Dorothy walked out of the hotel and into the Chicago evening, she clutched Captain Santos's business card in her hand. For the first time in 3 years, she began to wonder if there might be a way back to the person she used to be. But first, she had to help the FBI catch the person who had tried to burn down the building where she'd spent the last 3 years of her life, even if that person was a fellow veteran who had lost his way. Dorothy's phone buzzed at 4:47 a.m., jolting her awake from another nightmare about burning buildings and Sarah Rodriguez's final words. The caller ID showed Agent Torres's number. We need you downtown, Torres said without preamble. Tyler Walsh just barricaded himself inside a warehouse with enough explosives to level half the block. He's demanding to speak with you. Dorothy was already reaching for her clothes. Why me? He says you're the only person he'll understand. Dorothy, this guy is unstable and heavily armed. We've got SWAT positioned around the building, but he's made it clear that if anyone approaches without you, he'll detonate everything. 20 minutes later, Dorothy found herself in the back of an FBI tactical vehicle, speeding through the empty Chicago streets toward the warehouse district. Agent Torres sat across from her, reviewing Tyler Walsh's military file on a tablet. Staff Sergeant Tyler Walsh, Army Special Forces, Torres read aloud. 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. Specialized in demolitions and urban warfare. Discharged in 2020 after a PTSD-related incident that resulted in assault charges against a superior officer. Dorothy stared out the window at the city passing by. What kind of incident? His commanding officer refused to approve medical leave for Tyler's squadmate, who was showing signs of severe psychological trauma. The soldier committed suicide 3 days later. Tyler blamed the CO and attacked him during the funeral. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Another veteran lost in the gap between military service and civilian life. Another soldier carrying the weight of lost friends and institutional betrayal. Has he hurt anyone yet? Dorothy asked. No, the warehouse was empty when he broke in. But Dorothy, this isn't just about making a statement anymore. We found his manifesto posted online an hour ago. He's targeting financial institutions, government buildings, anywhere he thinks represents the system that abandoned veterans. Blackstone was just the beginning. They arrived at the scene to find 3 city blocks cordoned off by police barriers. News vans lined the perimeter, their satellite dishes reaching toward the gray dawn sky like metallic flowers. FBI tactical teams had positioned themselves around the warehouse, a converted brick building that had once housed a textile factory. Agent Torres led Dorothy to the command post, a mobile trailer equipped with communication equipment and tactical displays. Through the windows, Dorothy could see the warehouse clearly, a 3-story structure with boarded-up windows and multiple entry points, all of which Tyler had undoubtedly booby-trapped. He's been in there for 6 hours, explained Commander Sarah Walsh, the SWAT team leader. We've had eyes on the building since midnight, but no movement. He's got cell phone contact, and he's been coherent but agitated. Every time we try to establish dialogue, he says he'll only talk to Sergeant Dorothy Mitchell. Dorothy felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. In Afghanistan, she'd been the one her squad turned to when the situation seemed impossible. Now, years later, and thousands of miles from any battlefield, she was being asked to step into that role again. What's his tactical situation? Dorothy asked, falling back into military terminology without thinking. Commander Walsh looked surprised by the question, then answered with professional respect. Unknown number of explosive devices throughout the building. He's got a high ground advantage on the 3rd floor with clear sight lines to all approaches. The building structure is old brick and steel, good cover, but also potential for catastrophic collapse if he detonates. Escape routes. Multiple, but we've got them covered. Problem is, he doesn't seem interested in escaping. This looks like a suicide mission. Dorothy studied the warehouse through binoculars, her combat engineer training automatically assessing the tactical challenges. Tyler had chosen his position well. The building gave him defensive advantages while maximizing potential casualties if things went wrong. I need to go in, Dorothy said finally. Absolutely not, Agent Torres replied immediately. We're not sending an unarmed civilian into a building with an unstable demolition expert. I'm not a civilian, Dorothy said quietly, and I might be the only person who can get through to him. Before anyone could protest further, Dorothy's phone rang. The number was blocked, but she knew who it was. This is Dorothy. Sergeant Mitchell. Tyler's voice was rough, strained. Figured they'd bring you in eventually. Tyler, I need you to tell me what's going on. Nobody else has to get hurt here. Hurt? Tyler laughed bitterly. Lady, people have been getting hurt for years. You know how many veterans are homeless right now? How many killed themselves because they couldn't get proper mental health care? The system's been hurting us since the day we came home. Dorothy could hear the pain beneath the anger, the same pain she'd carried for years. I know, but this isn't the answer. Isn't it? How else do we get their attention? How else do we make them understand what they've done to us? By being better than them, Dorothy said, by proving that we're worth more than our worst moments. Easy for you to say. You found a way to disappear, blend in. Some of us can't do that. Dorothy closed her eyes, thinking about her 3 years of hiding behind a janitor's uniform. Tyler, disappearing isn't living. It's just a different kind of dying. There was silence on the line for several seconds. I want to see you, Tyler said finally, face to face. No tricks, no SWAT teams, just you. Tyler, those are my terms, Sergeant. You come in alone, or I turn this whole block into a crater. The line went dead. Dorothy looked around at the FBI agents and SWAT officers, all of them staring at her with expressions ranging from concern to outright alarm. I'm going in, Dorothy said. Like hell you are, Commander Walsh replied. I've got 15 officers here, and I'm not sending a civilian into a potential death trap. Then don't send a civilian, Dorothy said, meeting the commander's gaze. Send a soldier. Agent Torres stepped between them. Dorothy, even if we agreed to this, which we haven't, you'd be walking into a building rigged with explosives by someone who clearly has nothing left to lose. Maybe that's exactly why it has to be me, Dorothy replied. Tyler and I have more in common than you think. We both came home from war and struggled to find our place. The difference is, I found people who saw my value even when I couldn't see it myself. She thought about Captain Santos, about Marcus Chen, even about the FBI agents who had come to respect her expertise over the past day. People who had looked past the janitor's uniform and seen the soldier underneath. Give me a vest and a radio, Dorothy continued. I'll go in, talk to him, try to convince him to surrender peacefully. And if he won't surrender? Agent Torres asked. Dorothy was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Then I'll do what I was trained to do. I'll assess the explosive devices and find a way to neutralize them. Commander Walsh shook her head. Even if you could disarm his bombs, which is a huge if, we don't know his state of mind. He could decide to detonate manually the moment he sees you. Or, Dorothy said, he could see a fellow veteran who understands his pain and be willing to listen to reason. The debate continued for another 10 minutes, but Dorothy knew they were running out of options. Tyler had made his demands clear, and every minute they waited increased the risk of him following through on his threats. Finally, Agent Torres made the decision. Gear her up. Full tactical vest, helmet, radio. But Dorothy, the moment this goes sideways, you get out of there. We're not losing anyone else today. As Dorothy strapped on the borrowed tactical equipment, she felt a familiar sensation, the clarity that came with accepting a dangerous mission. It was the same feeling she'd had before every bomb disposal operation in Afghanistan, the calm that settled over her when lives hung in the balance. Dorothy, Agent Torres said, as she prepared to approach the warehouse, for what it's worth, I think Tyler chose the right person to talk to. You understand what he's going through in ways the rest of us can't. I understand the pain, Dorothy replied, checking her radio one final time. But I also understand that pain doesn't justify hurting innocent people. Tyler's forgotten that distinction. As Dorothy walked across the empty street toward the warehouse, she could feel dozens of eyes watching her through scopes and binoculars. The weight of everyone's expectations pressed down on her shoulders, but she pushed it aside and focused on the task ahead. The warehouse door was slightly ajar, and Dorothy could see a tripwire stretched across the entrance at ankle height, Tyler's handiwork. She carefully stepped over it and called out into the darkness. Tyler, it's Dorothy Mitchell. I'm coming in. Third floor, Tyler's voice echoed from somewhere above. And Sergeant, come alone, or we both go up in smoke. Dorothy began climbing the stairs, each step taking her deeper into a confrontation that would test everything she'd learned about courage, sacrifice, and the true meaning of service. Behind her, the world held its breath and waited to see if one veteran could save another from the darkness that had consumed so many of their brothers and sisters in arms. The third floor of the warehouse opened into a vast, empty space punctuated by support beams and broken windows. Tyler Walsh sat in the center of the room, surrounded by carefully arranged explosive devices. He looked smaller than Dorothy remembered, diminished by the weight of whatever demons had driven him to this moment. You came, Tyler said, without looking up. His hands rested on what appeared to be a dead man's switch. Wasn't sure you would. I gave my word, Dorothy replied, stopping about 20 feet away. Close enough to talk, far enough to react if things went wrong. Just like I gave my word to serve my country. Some promises you don't break. Tyler finally raised his head, and Dorothy saw the exhaustion in his eyes. This wasn't the face of a terrorist or a madman. This was the face of a broken soldier who had run out of options. You know what's funny? Tyler said. My sister Jennifer talks about you sometimes. Says she's just the cleaning lady, nobody important. If she only knew she was talking about a decorated combat veteran. Jennifer doesn't define who I am, Dorothy said carefully, and neither does the uniform I wear to work. But that's just it, isn't it? Tyler's voice cracked with emotion. We're invisible to them, all of us. We come home from war, and suddenly we're nothing. No one sees the Purple Hearts, the Bronze Stars, the friends we lost. They just see problems to be managed. Will it? Tyler gestured toward his explosive setup. Because I guarantee you that after today, people will remember that veterans exist.
They'll remember that we fought for this country and got nothing but broken promises in return. They'll remember a terrorist attack, Dorothy countered. They'll remember fear and destruction. Is that really how you want people to think about us? Tyler was quiet for a moment, his thumb hovering over the detonator switch. What would you have me do, Sergeant? Go back to being invisible? Apply for more jobs that don't call me back because they see combat veterans and think unstable liability? I'd have you remember who you really are, Dorothy said. Staff Sergeant Tyler Walsh, a soldier who took an oath to protect innocent people, not harm them. Those innocent people don't give a damn about us. Some of them do. Dorothy thought about Marcus Chen, about Captain Santos, about Agent Torres. Tyler, yesterday I was just a janitor that nobody noticed. Today, the FBI is offering me a consulting position. The Chicago Fire Department wants me to help train their emergency response teams. People started seeing me when I stopped hiding who I really am. It's too late for me, Tyler said. I've already crossed the line. There's no coming back from this. There's always a way back, Dorothy insisted, but it starts with putting down that switch and walking out of here with me.
Tyler laughed bitterly. And then what? Prison for the rest of my life? Is that supposed to be better? Prison gives you a chance to make amends, to find purpose again, to maybe help other veterans who are struggling the way you're struggling now. Dorothy was close enough now to see the tears in Tyler's eyes. Tyler, your friend who committed suicide, what was his name? Danny Rodriguez, Tyler said after a moment. Dorothy's breath caught. Rodriguez, the same last name as her friend Sarah, who had died in her arms in Afghanistan. What would Danny think about this moment, about you using his memory to justify hurting innocent people? Tyler's hand trembled on the detonator. Don't you dare use him against me. I'm not using him against you. I'm asking you to honor him. Dorothy's voice was steady, but her heart was racing. Danny wanted to live, Tyler. He wanted to come home and build a life. The system failed him, but that doesn't mean we have to fail each other. I can't. Tyler's voice broke completely. I can't carry this anymore. The guilt, the anger, the feeling like I'm worthless. It's too heavy. Then let me help you carry it, Dorothy said, extending her hand. That's what soldiers do for each other. We share the load. For a long moment, Tyler stared at Dorothy's outstretched hand. The warehouse was silent, except for the distant sound of helicopters circling overhead and the faint crackle of radio communications from Dorothy's vest. How do you do it? Tyler asked finally. How do you keep going when everything feels pointless? I remember that service isn't just about the uniform you wear, Dorothy replied. It's about using your skills to help people, whether you're disarming bombs in Afghanistan or keeping a building safe in Chicago. Purpose doesn't disappear when you come home, it just changes form. Tyler looked around at the explosives surrounding him, then back at Dorothy. If I put this down, if I surrender, will you tell people about Danny? Will you make sure they remember that he mattered? I promise, Dorothy said without hesitation. Danny Rodriguez will be remembered as a hero who served his country, not as a casualty the system forgot. Slowly, carefully, Tyler set the detonator switch on the floor and pushed it away from him. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Dorothy moved forward and kicked the switch further away, then knelt beside Tyler as he collapsed into sobs. It's okay, she said, putting a protective arm around his shoulders. It's going to be okay. Command, this is Mitchell. The suspect is in custody. The scene is secure, but we need an EOD team to clear the explosives. Copy that, Mitchell. Outstanding work. As FBI agents and bomb disposal experts swarmed into the warehouse, Dorothy stayed with Tyler until the paramedics arrived. Whatever happened next, the arrest, the trial, the long road to rehabilitation, Tyler wouldn't face it alone. Dorothy adjusted her new Chicago Fire Department training coordinator uniform in the mirror of her apartment. It was the first time in 3 years that she'd worn something to work other than janitor's coveralls, and the reflection looking back at her was someone she barely recognized, someone who looked like they had purpose again. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Chen. "Saw the news story about your new job. Well deserved. Drink tonight to celebrate?" She smiled and typed back, "Absolutely." The news story had been Agent Torres's idea, a feature about Dorothy's journey from decorated combat veteran to undervalued janitor to respected public servant. The reporter had focused on Dorothy's courage during the warehouse standoff and her new role training first responders, but had also highlighted the broader issues facing veterans transitioning to civilian life. Dorothy's doorbell rang, and she opened it to find Captain Santos standing in the hallway holding a package wrapped in brown paper. "Thought you might want this back," Captain Santos said, handing Dorothy the package. Inside was Dorothy's old Army dress uniform, cleaned and pressed, along with her medals and ribbons. At the bottom of the box was her Purple Heart, the medal she'd hidden away for so long. "How did you—" "FBI returned your personal effects from the apartment search," Captain Santos explained. "Agent Torres thought you might want them for tonight." "Tonight?" Captain Santos smiled. "Did I forget to mention? The mayor's office is holding a ceremony to honor your service, both military and civilian. Apparently, saving a building full of people tends to get their attention." Dorothy stared at the Purple Heart in her hands, remembering the day she'd received it. The pain, the guilt, the weight of surviving when Sarah Rodriguez hadn't. But now, looking at the medal, she felt something different. Not pride exactly, but acceptance. This was part of her story, part of who she was. Hiding it hadn't honored Sarah's memory, it had diminished it. "Captain, would you mind helping me put these on? It's been a while." As Captain Santos helped Dorothy pin her medals to her dress uniform, Dorothy thought about Tyler Walsh, now in federal custody, but receiving the mental health treatment he should have gotten years ago. She thought about Jennifer Walsh, who had apologized tearfully for never seeing Dorothy as just a janitor. She thought about Harrison Webb, who had offered her a consulting position with Blackstone's security team, an offer she'd politely declined. Most of all, she thought about the conversation she'd had with Agent Torres the day before. "You know," Torres had said, "the FBI could use someone with your skills and perspective. We've got a veteran outreach program that's looking for coordinators who understand both sides of the equation." Both sides? The military side and the civilian side. Someone who's been where these struggling veterans are, but who's also found a way forward. Someone who can bridge that gap. Dorothy had promised to consider it, and she was still considering it as she prepared for tonight's ceremony. The ceremony was held in the grand ballroom of Chicago City Hall, filled with firefighters, police officers, city officials, and members of the press. Dorothy stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, many of them belonging to people who had worked alongside her for years without truly seeing her. 3 years ago, Dorothy began, I came to Chicago because I wanted to disappear. I wanted to be invisible, to hide from a past that felt too heavy to carry. I paused, finding Marcus Chen's encouraging face in the crowd.
What I learned is that you can't heal by hiding. You can't find purpose by pretending to be less than you are. And you can't honor the people you've lost by diminishing the gifts they died protecting. Dorothy touched the Purple Heart on her chest. This medal represents the worst day of my military career, the day I lost my best friend and fellow soldier, Sarah Rodriguez. For years, I saw it as a reminder of failure, of not being fast enough or skilled enough to save her. But I understand now that it's not about failure, it's about service. It's about being willing to risk everything for others, even when you're afraid. She looked directly at Harrison Webb, who was sitting in the front row looking distinctly uncomfortable. To anyone who's ever been dismissed as just anything, just a janitor, just a veteran, just someone trying to get by, I want you to know that there's no such thing as just when it comes to human dignity. Every person has value, every story matters, and sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in the most ordinary places. The applause was thunderous, but Dorothy barely heard it. She was thinking about tomorrow, about her new job training firefighters and emergency responders, about the veterans she might be able to help find their way, about Tyler Walsh, who had written her a letter from prison thanking her for showing him that there was still hope for soldiers who had lost their way.
As the ceremony concluded and people began to approach her with congratulations and job offers, Dorothy felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer hiding. She was Sergeant Dorothy Mitchell, Purple Heart recipient, and she had work to do. The janitor's uniform was gone forever, but the woman who had worn it, who had learned humility and resilience and the true meaning of service in the most unlikely of places, she would carry those lessons forward into whatever came next. Some recognitions are worth waiting for, and some people are worth seeing even when they're standing right in front of you. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.